You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis, Wright.
Car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with The Attorneys of Hollis Wright.
Hello and welcome into The Attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. On this show, we're tackling a topic that every Alabama worker should understand. That's workers' compensation. Whether you slipped in a break room, you got hurt while traveling to work, maybe you even had an injury in the company parking lot, whatever it is, we're going to get into it and talk about it. But don't forget this, lawyers for Hollis Wright, they're standing by right now to take a live call from you at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free confidential call. You can reach someone from Hollis Wright right now. We're so glad to have with us, Josh, David Nomberg, who's with us to tackle this case, this topic for us.
You know, and here's the thing, like we have done a lot of shows on workers' compensation, and I like, and number one, David is a very longtime personal friend of mine. We do business together, work on cases together. But in addition to that, like I like to bring other people on to talk about this topic because everyone has a different experience, pathway, and background on the topic. And if you're only exposing yourself on the show to one person on the issue of comp, I think that does a disservice to the public. So David's going to put a new spin on it. We're going to talk about some of the stuff that's been going on since the 80s and some changes that probably need to be made in the comp statute and unwrapping what you do if you've been injured. So David's perfect to be on the show. So first of all, welcome. So glad to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Let's just jump off from a starting point. This area of the law is not something everyone does. I don't personally do this. I do a spin-off, which is co-employee law, as you know. Yeah. I've spoken at a couple of your seminars related to co-employee law, but not everybody does comp. You got to know what you're doing to do comp. First of all, how did your brother get involved in this and with your practice group, and how did you get involved in comp and kind of being one of the leaders in the state in the area of comp?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. How we got involved, it's kind of a family thing. My dad was a work comp lawyer for decades, and so my brother, who I practiced with for over 20 years now, he became a work comp lawyer representing injured workers. And then my first job was working with him. And so he was already doing work comp representing injured workers. So I began to become a work comp lawyer, and I've been doing that for over 20 years now.
So we've had people on the show that they had a life experience and they did that law because of that life experience. Sometimes you just fall into it because that's what's happened your entire life, right?
That's right.
I like that. Well, I know you're good at it.
Yeah.
All right, let's, for someone sitting on the couch right now, watching this saying, I was injured at work, I'm concerned to report this, I'm going to get retaliated against. Dispel that. Talk with them just for a second about what should they do if they've been injured at work?
Sure. So my recommendation to people after they've had an on-the-job accident, the first thing they need to do is put their employer on notice of the accident. They can do that verbally by telling a supervisor. They can also put it in writing as well. So tell them you got hurt and then say, I need to see the doctor. I need to go see the company doctor. Request medical treatment. And at that point, the employer should do several things to get that work comp claim going.
Getting a lawyer involved, important on the front end?
I think so. It's not necessarily that you have to hire a lawyer, right? But you can talk to a lawyer, get some advice, have the lawyer explain what those steps are, explain what the benefits are, because it's very important for an injured worker to know what they can get under the Alabama Workers' Compensation Act and what they cannot get as well.
One of the things that, we get questions all the time is, if I report this comp case, can they retaliate against me and terminate me? And David will tell us the answer is no. There are protections. Yes, and it's another reason why you want to get a lawyer involved, because sometimes the value of the retaliation claim is greater than the underlying comp case itself.
That's right. Under Alabama law, it is illegal for the employer to fire an injured worker for making a work comp claim. So the injured worker does have some protections under the law. Now, some employers are still going to violate the law, and again, that's why they need to talk to a lawyer. But as I said, once they have the on-the-job accident, it's important to make the work comp claim. Therefore, they get some protection under the law at that point.
You know, Dave, when we came into the show, I mentioned that whether you got hurt in the company parking lot, you got hurt on the way to work, there are many locations where you might get injured that you may have a claim that may surprise people. Can you talk about some of those locations?
Sure. You know, when we think of most work accidents, right, it's in the warehouse, it's in the plant, it's out in a logging field. But as you're saying, Art, sometimes accidents happen in unique places in unique ways. And so, for instance, Alabama law protects an injured worker and gives them workers' compensation benefits for things like if they're going on break or if they're having lunch at the plant or in the company parking lot. You don't have to be clocked in. You can be clocked out and still have an accident at work, and that would be covered under the Alabama Workers' Compensation Act.
You know, and that's a unique part of the law. Having a lawyer look at is important. Another thing that David and I do together is evaluate claims with significant injuries for if there are other claims that are still inside the Workers' Comp Act but could relate to, for example, intentional conduct, could relate to willful conduct, could relate to safety guards being removed from equipment that causes injury. So what David does is a really good job. Not only does he handle the comp case, he also evaluates the cases to determine, do you have other avenues of recovery under the Comp Act that may be in addition to your regular workers' comp? Another reason why you want to get a lawyer involved in these cases to fully and completely evaluate the cases.
That's right. In certain circumstances, there are very limited amount of recovery for injured workers. And so we want to do what we can to help explore other avenues of compensation for them so that they are fully compensated for their work accidents.
Yeah, David and I have a case going right now where an individual has a very significant injury that related to the failure to properly maintain and service a safety guard that caused an injury, and that's in active litigation right now. Won't get into all the details, but just to tell you that those are example claims where not only does that individual have a workers' compensation claim, but may have a, if you will, a third party or co-employee claim that has been evaluated on David's end and my end to make sure that we fully and completely compensate that worker. And so, you know, that's just a good example of getting lawyers involved early, allow you to properly work your way through the system. Now, I know we're getting ready to go to break. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about, you know, this issue of the 220 cap and some of the things that have been around since the 80s and what we see for the future, what needs to change in the Comp Act, all that good stuff.
Yeah, sounds good.
David Nomberg is our guest. We're talking workers' compensation. You're watching The Attorneys, and want to remind you right now that you've got time to get in contact with one of the attorneys at Hollis, Wright. They're taking your calls, live calls, right now. You can reach someone. They're on the other end of the line of 1-844-LAW-TALK, or you can scan that QR code on the screen. We're going to take a break, but we'll continue this conversation on workers' comp when we come back. Stay with us.
Here's some good information from our firm to you. Hollis Wright recently launched the Law Talk podcast. With podcasts becoming so popular, this will be a simple way to provide our loyal viewers with more opportunities to access information about important legal topics and to learn more about our firm and how we can help you if the need ever arises. There are many ways to access the Law Talk podcast. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen. Also, episodes are always available on the Hollis Wright YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Just search up Hollis Wright in the Law Talk podcast. Don't wait, take advantage and listen today. Thanks for watching The Attorneys, and we know you'll enjoy the Law Talk podcast.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery. Find community.
At Bradford.
You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis, Wright.
You are watching The Attorneys, and we are talking workers' comp. But before we get back into the conversation, I want to give you an opportunity to reach someone at Hollis, Wright at 1-844-LAW TALK. Go ahead and make that call. It's a free and confidential call. We're talking with David Nomberg, and we just want to know about, David, as we're talking about someone who may get hurt at work. What are some of the benefits that they should receive if they are filing a workers' comp?
Sure. So the law is very specific about what an injured worker can and cannot get after a work accident. After a work accident, they are entitled to medical treatment, and that's paid for by the employer or the work comp carrier. It covers doctor's visits, hospital, diagnostic exams, and reimbursement on mileage when they go to the medical provider. If the authorized doctor takes the injured worker off work, they're entitled to receive 2/3 of their average weekly wage, and that's subject to a maximum weekly benefit. And then third, they are entitled to, I mentioned the mileage reimbursement, of course, that falls under the medical treatment. And then finally, towards kind of the end of their case or the end of their medical treatment, if they have a permanent impairment, they may be entitled to money. And if they have a vocational disability, they may be entitled to compensation as well. And vocational disability means they've got work restrictions assigned to them, so they're unable to go back to that previous job, or they can't find a similar paying job in a similar field. So those are some of the benefits they can get under the Work Comp Act.
So I know this, being a former trial lawyer present, was involved in some legislation when we were trying to help comp lawyers across the state and employees across the state increase the potential benefits they could get if they were injured. Comp statute's been around a long time. Talk a little bit about if someone ends up with a partial disability, are they capped at the amount of time that they can receive money and also the amount they can receive for weekly benefits?
Sure. So our Alabama Workers' Compensation Act has been around over 100 years. Okay. More specifically, there was a law put into place, I think it was approved in 1985, went into effect in 1987, a long time ago. And that law set into place a $220 per week cap that injured workers can receive if they are partially disabled, if they're permanently partially disabled. So, for instance, some body parts are worth X dollars. Okay? If you lose 100% of your arm in a work accident, you're going to be capped at $44,000, either $44,000 or $48,000. The leg is worth $44,000 or $48,000 as well. 100% loss of vision, $27,280. So there are certain body parts worth certain values, and that hasn't changed in 40 years. If a worker is also partially disabled, but say they hurt their shoulder or their back or their hip, they are limited in some instances to 300 weeks of benefits at $220 per week, which is a maximum of $66,000. So there are some caps in place for people that are not permanently totally disabled, but are permanently partially disabled.
I'm astounded by that, you know, and because you said it hasn't changed in over 40 years, but you know, we got all these other skyrocketing costs all over the place. What about partial? My arm is partially injured.
Yeah. Again, that cap is going to be in place at no more than, I think it's $48,000 on the arm. And there was no cost of living adjustment put in place in 85 or 87 when the law went into effect. And as you can tell, that's less than minimum wage now. It's below the poverty level in some instances.
The Comp Act needs some reform. Any comp lawyer will tell you that. For the benefit of employees, there's got to be either an inflationary component attached to the caps and the amounts that are allowed, or some metric that is attached that takes into consideration changing cost of goods, services, et cetera. And it just hasn't happened. There have been multiple efforts over the last 40 years to try and change it, but we're not quitting and we're not giving up. And I hope in my lifetime as a lawyer that there's an opportunity for workers to be able to get the true full benefit of their injury. But there is a very powerful lobby on the other side. And it's a complicated issue that's going to take some additional legislative work, but hopefully at the end of the day it'll happen.
Yeah, and this is why that I recommend, and you do too, that injured workers call a lawyer, call a work comp lawyer, because they're going to help you maximize your recovery under the law.
What is the maximum weekly amount of $11.72 that someone can get? I know we've talked about this before. How does that work into this?
Yeah, so if say you make that $3,000 a week and you get hurt. Earlier I mentioned that you would be entitled to 2/3 of your average weekly wage. However, high wage earners are going to be capped, and I think that's $1,172 per week, and that's under temporary total disability. So if you're injured, doctor takes you off work, you are making $3,000 a week, but you're not going to get $2,000 a week on TTD. You're going to get $1,172.
What should an employee who has been injured expect if they come to see you or call you and say, hey, Mr. Nomberg, I need to talk to you about my injury? What's the general process that you use to gather the information you need to get something started?
Yeah, so we're going to start with a phone consultation, and that's free of charge, and we're going to ask about 10 questions. That's just, I need to get some basic information about the accident, and then if I think I can help someone, I'm going to provide them a contract. I want them to hire me, right? But they don't pay me out of their pocket. We work off what's called a contingency fee contract, and the attorney fee is set by law at 15%.
Yeah. So that's another thing people need to recognize. Hiring a lawyer in the comp realm has a cap on the amount that the lawyer can receive, and it's a state law that dictates you can only receive 15%. Now, as David would explain, if there are other collateral claims that are also available to you, for example, a third party injures you that's not part of your company, and there's a potential negligence case against them, those are not going to be capped at 15%. Those are going to be standard rates. However, it doesn't change the fact that the worker has the ability to make sure that they're protected by getting the same quality of legal services as a defendant would have and the insurance company will have in trying to defend the case. Yeah. So definitely important.
I know we've been talking about, the caps. Yeah. What about if it's denied altogether? Can we talk about that as well?
Yeah, for sure.
All right. But David's
and I know we're about to go to break. Let's talk about that when we get back, for sure.
We'll do that. We're going to put a pin right there. We're going to talk about what happens if your claim is denied. As we're talking about workers' comp here on The Attorneys with David Nomberg. He's one of the most trusted voices in that area of this field. We're going to take a break, but reminding you, lawyers are standing by right now at Hollis Wright to take your call. Scan that QR code. You can reach them that way, or you can call 1-844-LAW-TALK. It's a free, confidential call. We'll take a break. We'll continue this discussion on workers' comp when The Attorneys continues right after this break.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
If this place could talk, it wouldn't. It would sing and celebrate all of our stories of addiction recovery, victory, and community. This is Bradford Health Services. It all changes here.
You're watching The Attorneys, a paid advertisement brought to you by the law firm of Hollis, Wright.
Welcome back. You are watching The Attorneys. We are here with the information you need in terms of workers' compensation as we come back with David Nomberg. And we were going to break talking about what happens if you're actually denied when you file for workers' comp.
Yeah. First thing to do is call a work comp lawyer.
Okay, absolutely.
If you have a denied claim, what makes Alabama interesting compared to the other states is that we do not have an administrative work comp system for the state of Alabama. We're the only state in the U.S. where we have a dispute, a denied claim. We get to go directly to court. We get to file our case in court in front of a circuit court judge, the same type of judge that would hear a medical malpractice case, a car wreck case, a divorce case in some instances. And so we would go through the litigation process and have a trial and have the judge determine whether the claim is what we call compensable, meaning it should be covered under work comp, or whether it's not compensable.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, there are significant differences between workers' comp case filed in the circuit court and then a traditional negligence or tort claim, as we call it, filed. Can you just unwrap that a little bit?
Sure. So a work comp case is going to be decided by a judge, not a jury. So that's one particular difference in the two. And then there are certain benefits that you might be able to ask for or get in a tort or negligence case that we can't get in a work comp case because the law says so. So in a work comp case, I'm not going to be able to get any money for my injured worker for pain and suffering, for emotional distress, for mental anguish, or for lost wages. It's just not allowed by law.
What is the process you use if someone calls you and says, look, I filed this comp case, I took your recommendation, they're making it difficult for me to stick around, they're trying to push me out. How do you manage that? Because I know you get those calls all the time where someone's concerned that they're being pushed out of the place of employment because, they don't want to provide a light duty job for them, whatever the issue may be. How do you resolve those issues, or how do you address those with clients?
Yeah. I mean, this may surprise you, but a lot of employers don't like it when their workers get injured,
Yeah.
okay? They may not make it easy on them after that, but the general advice is go to work, do your best, do your job. And if you feel like you're being retaliated against, say something to the Human Resources Department, right, and document what has been going on. And again, this is where you need to talk to a lawyer who represents injured workers or who helps people who've been retaliated against in work comp cases.
The interesting thing about workers' compensation is, and it's part of the lobby on the other side of the worker, which is basically the insurance side, and the company side, they say it's a no-fault system. So the results should be less because they don't get to defend the case with conduct that is someone contributing to their own injury, their own negligence had an impact on the case. All those things weigh into why we have not had major legislative reform in the area of comp. But it is a no-fault system, which means that if the injured worker had some involvement in their own injury, maybe it's a repetitive task and they got lazy at some point, they still can recover. And that's where David can step in and really convince them, hey, look, you still need to present a claim. In the tort side of things, if you contributed to your own injury, even 1% contributed to your own injury, you can be prevented from recovering. And we talk about that a lot in some of our other shows. Now, there's some ways around that lawyers can use and proof and evidence that can be presented. But it's a totally different type system. And, it kind of is what it is right now. The hope is down the road, we're going to do right by the worker in Alabama, and we're going to try and attach some level of inflationary metric to some of these standards and number of weeks and the caps that we have. And I'm just hopeful that'll happen in the future.
Let's look down the road. And I know you guys have been practicing law for a number of years. And this topic in particular, what type of reforms do you see are needed to help the injured worker?
I think that most work comp lawyers on both sides that represent the employee and the employer will agree that the 220 cap needs to be increased. Again, it's been in place for 40 plus years. That needs to change. There are some other things that on the medical side that the employer side, the work comp carrier side would like to see changed as well. So there's room on both sides. But workers in Alabama are Alabama's best resource, and they need to be taken better care of.
And we talk just quickly about concepts like the 220 cap. The reality is that cap is applied to a number of weeks based on a scheduled injury. So if it's an arm, an eye, a brain, a foot, a toe, there's a certain number of weeks that 220 cap can apply to depending on the type of injury you have, if it's a permanent injury, for example. And that 220 is multiplied by the number of weeks based on the schedule. So if you increase the 220 cap to a more reasonable number that takes into consideration the last 40 years of workers working in Alabama from 1987 forward, it increases the value of the claims for those that are injured in Alabama. So just to unwrap that, I think it's important for people to recognize that's the type of reform that David's talking about. It's the type of reform that I've been involved in advocating for, and most workers' comp lawyers, both, I think David agrees, on the plaintiff side, but even on the defense side, recognize some reform is necessary, for sure.
So what's your best advice to those watching at home who may have been injured, they know someone who's been injured? What should they do other than, we know, number one thing is contact an attorney.
That's right.
What's some other things they should do?
Yeah. After someone's been hurt at work, put your employer on notice, either in writing, through a text or an email, a letter, or tell them verbally. Ask for medical treatment. Say, I'm making a work comp claim. I need to see the company doctor, and go get treatment. Go see the doctor. Follow the doctor's advice. If the doctor recommends physical therapy, go to every appointment. Follow your doctor's advice and talk to a work comp lawyer. The work comp lawyer can explain what the rules, the benefits, what you can get, what you can't get, and can help guide you through a very complex process. Because I can assure you on the other side, there are lots of people working on the insurance side of things, and so that injured worker needs an advocate, someone that's going to look out for their best interest during this process.
We're wrapping up here, but one of the things I wanted to mention is you don't just practice law on this side, you actually hold monthly lunches for other lawyers and help train those lunches. I've been lucky enough to speak at one or two of those. You actually train other lawyers on changes in workers' comp. This is a passion of yours.
It is. I enjoy hanging out with work comp lawyers and talking about what we do to try to educate myself and help educate other lawyers. So it's an interesting topic. It is my life's work, my passion. So I enjoy it, and appreciate you coming and talking to us.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. We appreciate the passion and love that you were able to come on. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And we enjoy what you shared with us as well. And I'm sure you did at home. Make sure you make another appointment next week to catch the attorney, same place, same station. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.